Tales from the Horror, Through the Void Darkly, 3. Out in the endless and chaotic void, Jaden stared at a gigantic eyeball with massive tentacles creeping toward the fortress tank. He shuddered when one of the tentacles grabbed a carcass of some nameless creature and held it in front of the dark retina. The eyeball seemed to be inspecting the carcass, when suddenly the retina opened to reveal curved and crooked teeth like twisted swords. "Oh shit," he mumbled in disbelief and staggered backward. He quickly regained his balance, turned to Haley and asked, "What do we do? Did you see that thing? It's coming right for us." Haley observed the surreal giant eyeball through the small window and released a slow, measured breath. "I think I remember reading about it." She stared at the creature for a long moment, as if she were trying to unravel some long-forgotten mystery. "I read about it in one of the tomes we found. It's a creature of the abyss, one of the great giants. This one was called Igathul, and it's attracted to light, or fear. Or was it light and fear? Which one? I can't remember," she said, staring at the grotesque creature slowly approaching them. "I'm not sure which version of the story was right." "Let's imagine they all were." Mahan turned to the panel and yanked several levers to shut down the lights. But nothing happened. The generators didn't power down. The lights seemed to flicker and shine brighter just to spite him, and Igathul did not pause or hesitate in its steady advancement toward them. Thinking fast, Mahan turned and kicked the generators with all his strength. But again, the lights only surged and grew brighter, as though to continue to mock him. Then, realizing he was kicking the wrong mechanism, Mahan lunged forward and smashed the containers holding the strange organic petrol connected to the generators. The glass shattered, and the reeking black fluid drained to the floor, with tiny fish-like things flopping over the ground. A moment later, the generators stopped jerking and chugging and belching. The lights flickered on and off, and slowly dimmed to complete darkness. Suddenly, Igathul froze, but the retina seemed fixated on them. At that instant, Haley felt Jaden's trembling shoulder next to hers. She nudged him slightly and whispered, "Stop shaking, JJ. We're not out of this yet. I'm trying." "Try harder." Mahan approached the small window. "I think it senses fear." Igathul edged closer, staring hard at them. Monstrous tentacles discharged glowing blue slime and slithered up and down the fortress tank like hungry eels. "JJ, please, calm yourself. It's goddamn Cthulhu. Don't tell me to calm myself." Haley released a calming breath. "Try not to think about it. Just close your eyes and think of sheep. Count sheep or something." Sheep? Jaden couldn't believe what he was hearing. But he listened to her suggestion and closed his eyes. In his mind's eye, he visualized sheep grazing in a peaceful meadow with a soft, calming melody he had once heard in an elevator. Then the elevator music stopped all at once. The sheep stopped eating and looked up to the sky as Igathul rose from the churning fog. With a terrible shriek, the horrible giant snatched all the sheep with its tentacles and crammed them into its hungry, salivating mouth, crushing skulls, bones, and bleeding heads. Instantly, Jaden's eyes snapped open. "Doesn't work. All I'm thinking about is—" Igathul interrupted him with a loud roar and proceeded to slam the ground with frenzied tentacles. Jaden stopped breathing and blinked as if he had just stepped into a morgue. All three stared at the monstrous creature, trying to understand what they were seeing. Igathul stopped slamming the ground and was motionless for a moment that felt like eternity. Then slowly, as the three of them watched in relief, Igathul turned and slithered away, munching on scrap and bones and cadavers as it moved through the endless wasteland. They stared after the creature as it faded into thick clouds of insects and shapeless bird things. After a long silence, Jaden released a nervous laugh. Mahan patted him on the back. "I guess we're lucky it's only attracted to the lights." Jaden turned to Haley. "Don't ever tell me to count sheep again." Haley's face broke into a smile, and she was just about to laugh when she heard strange things crying like newborn babies in the thick black muck that had drained from the containers. Jaden followed her very serious gaze and was nearly knocked over by the scene before him. He asked in a voice rising with mingled terror and panic, "Someone please tell me what the hell I'm looking at?" Arcus, 10-187. I've been pushing through the void for weeks. Maybe longer. Endless bodies and discarded realms as far as the eye can see. It seems a lot worse than any version of Bara's story I've read, and the constant feeling of dread is overwhelming. I'm starting to doubt anyone ever escaped this place. Arcus, 732. A lawyer offers Dwight millions to settle with the company. He tells them he'll settle if he gets a letter of apology for hiring and enabling a known abuser. They scoff at the request. They would rather give millions of dollars than apologize. Dwight turns down the offer, and I must admit this is something I didn't expect from him. But then again, so many characters I've studied over the years have, to one degree or another, contradicted my initial impression of them. I guess that's what makes them human, the contradictions. Dwight probably should have just taken the money and ran. That way he wouldn't have had to endure all those menial jobs throughout his life. But then again, there would be no elephant incident at the zoo. Nor would there be the coyote incident when he worked as a roadkill collector, or even the incident driving the limousine across the country for that metal band. Come to think of it, I'm glad Dwight didn't take the money. I have found his memories amusing, if not entertaining. Arcus, 10-202. I entered the most peculiar realm yet. A purged realm with people dressed in cardboard boxes living in homes made of rotten candy and putrefying junk food. It had Zezeltrix written all over it. I kicked down a moldy gingerbread house, and the structure instantly dissipated into a swirl of scintillating blue energy. I can't help but wonder where this mad designer comes from, and why I have found little about her in the stories. Her ability to manipulate this dimension and manifest anything that pops into her head suggests she comes from a highly advanced world, not unlike my own, possibly even more advanced. One thing is clear, Zezel understands the connection between thought and feeling to manifest reality. She has even found ways to hide secrets in the blood of her creations. She may even be one of the unknowns, who have hidden countless secrets throughout the realms. Arcus, 42. Those who are referred to as the Unknowns have journeyed through this old one, hiding secret knowledge within the realms in strange ways. It is said that this knowledge is hidden in the fog, in the buildings, and even in the blood of creatures. It's hard to make sense of what they mean. What is clear is the Unknowns seem to be able to travel throughout realms with relative ease. The ability to move between realms alone would be a secret worth having, even if I would have to skin one of those horrific creatures lurking around in the fog. The Magnificent Maurice, 2. I ended up in a peculiar circumstance. Somehow I found myself in a collapsing barn, locked in a stable covered in rotten hay. I shared the stable with several other horses, some crazy pigs and dogs. I was to be the till horse, but I was still too young. and my legs just weren't ready for that kind of work. The farmer used to strap me to this cold metal contraption that dug into my skin, and I'd pull or get beaten or have the dogs unleashed on me. Well, that wasn't so fair. And one dog got real smart with Roy, an old horse with the best jokes you ever heard. And Roy kicked that dog right in the teeth. Shattered them so he couldn't use them against me or any other animal. Even broke his neck bones. Farmer Joe whipped Roy until his arm got tired, and Joe collapsed on account of all the shine he had been guzzling down. Farmer Joe got into a rhubarb over everything, and we all got our share of thrashings. Mean, no-good buckethead, that one. But he got a taste of his own medicine in the end. I was watching the whole thing from a crack in the stable. All I remember is seeing Joe thrashing my friend Betty and screaming at the dogs to help him give her pain. She was tired and cold, and I was thinking that the dogs shouldn't go after Betty, but Joe. And the funny thing was, after I thought that, the dogs did nothing. Absolutely nothing. And he was getting more and more upset. Then he turns his whip on the dogs, and then I did it. I wished one of them dogs would just teach him a lesson. Before I knew what was what, one of the dogs turns on Farmer Joe and bites his leg and rips out a good meaty chunk of flesh. Now Joe yells and shrieks and tries to stand, but the dogs surrounded him and pounced, and the yells and shrieks turned to gurgles, and the gurgles soon turned to silence. Then one of them dogs comes and frees us all. As I made my way outside, I heard a series of gunshots and yelps. Suddenly, all the animals went off in every direction, to the dirt road, to the meadow, to the river, and I galloped off to the forest. I rushed through trees and bramble, and only stopped when I felt I was being followed. That's when I turned to see a litter of pups following me. I told them to scram and go find their mommy. I shooed them away and continued through pools of shadow and light. But every time I glanced back, there they were, stumbling over bushes, logs, or trying to hide from my angry gaze. I told them to quit following me. That was that. Saga of the Red Crane, Secrets of the Unknown. Saku whispered words of caution to Maurice as they rode through the cobblestone streets of a medieval village. An incandescent red moon hung boldly in the sky, casting an eerie glow over clusters of crumbling stone homes. Small cooking fires flickered throughout the village, with pots of blood boiling in the dark. Crimson blood and other fluids drained from a heap of bodies, stacked up and left to ferment. In the piles, she recognized several members of the Black Serpent clan, ripped and mangled and half devoured by maggots, chewed and rotting remnants of men and women, just like she had read in one of the tomes. This was the place. This was definitely the place. Black Serpent disciples had come here, searching for the hidden secrets of the unknowns to transcribe to their scrolls, and they had somehow met their demise at the claws of fanged creatures she didn't want to think about. Vampires. She despised vampires, all manifestations of them throughout the countless realms. Now Saku nudged Maurice to slow down as they searched the village for signs or symbols left behind by the unknowns, secret symbols she had read about in one of the many tomes she had salvaged from the abandoned towers. From these collected stories, she had been able to learn many secrets about this strange and horrific dimension in which she had been trapped and was trying desperately to escape. She had read the stories, the memories, and the annotations, and she was sure this was the village of the vampires, where the unknowns had hidden secret knowledge on how to manipulate the fog. "Be wary of vampires," Saku whispered. "Vampires?" Maurice questioned. "What do you mean, Vampires? You didn't tell me there would be vampires. Are we talking the ones more like people, or are we talking the ones more like giant bats? The ones more like beasts. Beasts with wings. Jeez. We're in a rhubarb now. I hate... A sudden shriek interrupted his words, as massive winged creatures with glinting razor-sharp teeth came hurtling at them from the shadows. In a blinding blur of speed, Saku leapt into the sky, her blade gleaming as she sent claws, limbs, and heads tumbling to the ground. When she landed, she didn't have time to think. She didn't even have time to breathe. Deadly claws swished over her head as she evaded wild attacks and countered with strategic swipes that left her assailants in pieces. Then she turned to see Maurice kicking and charging a vampire twice his size. Instantly, she charged toward them as the last remaining vampire smashed Maurice against a stone wall. The vampire hissed at Maurice and then suddenly turned to face Saku with its glowing red eyes. Saku slowed to a stride. Her eyes held the glare of the vampire as it tried to intimidate her with a roar, but with a flash of her blade, the roar was choked with a vicious thrust of cold steel. Blood gushed out like a geyser as the vampire collapsed to the ground, clutching its throat. Saku shook droplets of blood off her katana as she watched the vampire issue its last breath. Then she looked around the village, wondering where the unknowns may have hidden their secrets. She didn't see any markings. She had no idea. But she knew that they hid knowledge in so many different ways, it was hard, if not impossible, to keep track. It was at that moment Saku had an inspiration and remembered a detail from one of the stories she had read. Squatting, she used her blade to flay the skin off the vampire's arm, and though she expected to see luminous symbols in the fat and flesh, she saw nothing. With a sigh, she stood to peer at a cluster of homes in the thickening fog. Maurice came up beside her and was just about to speak when she lifted a silencing finger. She could sense something was amiss. Gazing ahead, she listened to sounds only her keen ears could have caught. The scraping of claws on stone, the faint chattering of teeth, the rattle of a stone under a foot, and the murmurings of vampires communicating in their strange language. Taking a small step forward, she realized the first attack had just been a test. Instinctively, Saku held her katana at the ready as she looked deep into the shadows. When she lowered her gaze, the vampires attacked, but not fast enough.